Our next speaker, Professor Ming Lu, sits at the forefront of China's economy, national strategy, and decision-making. For decades, China drove the world's growth, but today faces a new test of reinvention as all engines slow and new forces emerge. In a world as connected as ours, no economy stands alone. China's journey into this new frontier will ripple far beyond its borders. To introduce Professor Ming Lu, please welcome Woan, Director, Investments at Khazanah National. Woan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This morning, I have the great pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Lu Ming, for his feature address titled Structure and Growth, Opportunities and Challenges for the Chinese Economy. Now, Professor Lu has a CV that is the envy of all economists. He is the Distinguished Professor of Economics, Director of Shanghai Institute for National Economy, SHINE, and Research Fellow of the China Institute of Urban Governance at Shanghai Jiao Tong University. He is appointed as member of the National 5-Year Plan Expert Committee and a member of the Shanghai Decision-Making Advisory Committee. He has also worked as a professor at Fudan University and as Fulbright Scholar at Harvard University and National Bureau of Economic Research. He has also consulted for the World Bank and the ASEAN Development Bank. Professor Lu's research areas include the Chinese economy, urban, rural, and regional development, labor economics, and social economics. In recent years, his research also focuses on evaluating urban and regional development policies, as well as providing strategic thinking on how urban and spatial economics can promote quality development in China. Some of his recent work also emphasize on the need for shifts in development thinking and mindset within China as the country evolves into a post-industrial society, where services form a greater share of the economy in line with rising per capita GDP. Professor Lu is a widely published author and has won many awards. His recent acclaimed works include 大国大城, or Great Nation Needs Bigger City, which offers critical insights into China's urban-rural development. Now, you must think that such credentials belong to a run-of-the-mill economics professor. Interestingly, when I was researching his background as preparation for this session, I came across an old YouTube clip of him singing a song on the joy and pains of submitting research articles. As someone who has spent most of my career as a researcher, it definitely strikes a chord. He also has a philosophical and poetic streak, as evidenced in some of the writings on his website. And I was also told that he joins and organizes various music events. So there's definitely more to Professor Lu than meets the eye. Now, paving the way back to our session, the Chinese economy is now at an inflection point. Growth has slowed from the heydays of the 2000s. The population is aging. Gains from further industrialization is limited, given the current state of overcapacity. The ongoing US-China trade war will also impact China's policy options. So, what are the opportunities and challenges for the Chinese economy moving forward? Let's put our hands together to welcome Professor Lu. Professor, over to you.
Thank you so much for the very interesting introduction, like an artist. I'm here to introduce the situation of the recent economic growth and the challenges for the Chinese economy. So as everybody knows that in recent years, especially after the year 2007, the global financial crisis year, the Chinese economy has now seen a slower growth as a trend since that year. So many people are interested in why Chinese economy is growing slower than before. So if you look at the textbook theory, if you use that to look at China, it will tell you a very pessimistic story, because the textbook tells us that the GDP growth of a country should be dependent on accumulation of production factors, including labor and capital. But China is experiencing aging issue, and also the fertility rate is also declining. And China has also been known as a country with overinvestment that is not sustainable. And productivity growth in recent years is also declining. So putting all the things together, you will predict that the Chinese economy will slow down even further. Maybe that's true to some extent, But I will try to give you another view on Chinese economy that is structure. So where do we start? We start from the recent trend of the aggregate number. The first thing I want to show you is the aging trend. You have already seen that the population aging issue is very serious in China. A lot of regions in China are seeing a very fast growing of the old people. And at the same time, the fertility rate is also declining. The whole country's recent population census tells us that the average fertility rate for the Chinese women is now at around 1.3. If you look at only one region, that is Shanghai, the most developed region in China, Shanghai's population is like a medium-sized country. But there, the fertility rate is even as low as 0.6, maybe the lowest of the world. So that's very pessimistic. Okay. So this is, of course, a challenge, right? So the issue is, how does the Chinese government deal with that trend? I think we're doing the following things. The first thing is to try our best to encourage young people to give birth to more children. Recently, we're doing a lot of things like subsidizing the second child, even the third child. And the second thing we're doing is to delay the retirement age. The retirement age in China is very, very low. Maybe people don't know in this room that the Chinese retirement age was set in 1950s, just after the Second World War. And at that time, our life expectancy was only around 40. And our retirement age was set to 50 or 55 for women and 55 or 60 for men. But now, Chinese life expectancy is now rising to 79, even higher than the United States, but our retirement age didn't change before. Only starting from this year, the retirement age will be delayed. So, I mean, this will give another round of growth in labor supply. So don't worry that much. And at the same time, the productivity, which is due to the high growth of education and the innovation, is also growing. So that's the third source of labor quality. And finally, today I will tell you another source of the increase of labor supply, effective labor supply in the urban area. That is because of the urbanization process. Okay, so today I will talk about two issues which are related to each other, which is related to the economic structure of the Chinese economy. One is the industrial structure. And then the second one is the spatial structure for you to understand such a large country. Now let us look at the first thing, which is the industrial structure. You know, people are talking about one thing, which is also a very hot topic, which is deflation issue. People are worrying that China's debt is very high and the price level is going down. Yeah, partly true. If you look at the statistical number issued by the Statistics Bureau of the country, it is true that the CPI is declining. But please be very careful here. Please look at the composition of CPI. Our Statistics Bureau also report the different compositions of CPI. Please look at this figure. There are several groups of numbers, right? Several bars, right? The left-hand side of each group usually are the traditional goods, like manufacturing goods. And to the right-hand side, especially the orange color, the orange bar represents the other. What do you mean by other? Other means these are more, recent growing items, which is very hard for us to characterize. So we all call it others. But others are mainly services. So when people are criticizing that the Chinese economy is experiencing deflation, if you look at service sector, for example, tourism, these days are the National Day of China. Everywhere in China is congested. People are going around, right? And if you look at movie, as long as you have high quality movie, then哪吒this year can rank number 5 in the world. So by which I mean, it's not that true for us to argue that in China there is no demand. There is demand. There are a lot of demands. But in service sector, the supply side, usually it was repressed before. So in the future, I'm quite sure that in next round of economic development, service development will be more and more important in such a country. Please now let us look at the economic structure of China. You can see that Even in the past year, we can see the service sector has already accounted for 57% of the whole economy. And for employment, it's almost half. And if you look at some relatively developed regions in China, like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, those large cities, the service sector could even account for more than 70% of the economy. And it's still growing. Why I'm quite sure that it's still growing? Because I want to show you an international comparison between China and other developed countries. So on this figure, you can see a line which represents the relationship between service share of the GDP and GDP per capita. You can see a high correlation between these two variables. Those are for the OECD countries. But where is China? China is represented by those pink arrows. You can see that if you only look at China, China is also rising in terms of service share in GDP. But when we compare China with the historical parts of the developed countries, you can see at every economic development stage, China's service share is much lower than other countries. Which means what? Looking into the future, I think there are two forces driving China's service sector growing up. One is to correct the economic structure by developing more services to catch up with other countries. And then, as time goes by, as long as Chinese people will get even richer and richer, the increasingly growing demand will be from service sector. And let us compare China and the United States. In the United States, the first service share in consumption accounts for more than around 70%. But in China, the current share is only 46% of the consumption, which is from service. So we still have a huge space to develop it. So this is why I can judge that in the future, when we talk about Chinese economy together with the US-China relationship, I can predict that there are 4 certainties. You know, the whole theme of this forum is to debug the uncertainty. But we also want to seek certainty during the uncertain era. I would like to argue there are at least 4 trends which are very certain. Number one is China wants to be a manufacturing power, but this manufacturing power should rely more on innovation rather than on internal competition. This is why last year the Chinese government launched a war against the vicious competition between different regions and within some sectors. We started to enforce a law which is called as fair competition review. The second trend is China will boost domestic consumption very hard, especially to develop the service sector and promote employment, income, and consumption. Because compared with manufacturing sector, service sector will be more labor intensive, which is good for the Chinese people to share more in the national income and also to create more jobs. Just recently, the central government issued an official document that is to encourage the development of the consumer services in China, including elderly care, child care, domestic services, etc. Number 3, you can also see that a lot of Chinese manufacturing factories are going abroad, which means a huge opportunity for other countries, especially neighboring countries, to share the prosperity of the development of the manufacturing sector. Which means that for some factories, they feel that it's very hard for them to innovate. Then there is another choice, to find another place to produce the same thing, maybe. And number 4, I think it's also very important for it to have some opportunities to invest in China, which means that the Chinese government has decided to open up our service sector, including telecom, education, medical care, and many things. They have promised that the Chinese service sector will be more open to the international world. Okay, and how about United States? If you believe that globalization will still be the driving force for the next round of economic growth of the whole globe, I think we can predict that United States will come back to the table for new negotiation. And this is what we can see in the recent years. Okay, so back to China. In this year's People's Congress, the document to summarize the work of the government said that in the future, the Chinese government will formulate special measures to boost consumption capacity, to increase quality of supply, and improve the consumption environment, unleash the potential of the diversified and differentiated consumption and promote the upgrading of consumption. And they also will increase the incomes of residents through multiple channels to reduce the burden on low and middle income groups and improve the mechanism for regular wage increases of workers. And they will also allocate 300 million yuan in ultra long-term special treasury bonds to support the replacement of old consumer goods with new ones. As I know, in the future, the treasuries will be put more on service sector to encourage consumption in the future. And in this year's Congress, the government also said it's very important for us to invest on people because compared with the past, the Chinese people emphasize a lot on the investment on infrastructure and manufacturing, and in the future, investment on people will become more and more important. And they will also try to stabilize and expand employment. I don't want to speak too much about this point. And they also emphasize that we need to increase the investment on the service sector to support and encourage private investment, standardize the implementation of the new mechanism for public service, public-private partnership, guide more private capital to participate in the development of major infrastructure and social welfare projects. Okay, so this is the first one. The second one I want to emphasize is the spatial structure. You see, the first one is urbanization. Again, I want to compare China's urbanization, which is in orange, triangle. That's China's part. And the other line is the fitness between two variables. One is urbanization ratio on the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is the GDP per capita. You can see that developed countries will have a higher urbanization ratio. But again, when we compare China with other countries, you can see that at any stage of economic development, China's urbanization ratio is lower than other countries, right? Which means what? When the rural area, especially poor people, want to migrate to the cities to have better job, they still face a lot of barriers. Maybe you know that we still have a hukou system which restricts the migrants to the access to public services in the urban area. Okay, so we still have space to welcome more migrants to work in the cities. People say that Chinese economic growth, which is slowing down, is because of the population dividend, which is the old story. Chinese economic growth was supported by the supply of population, but now this population dividend has faded. To some extent, this judgment is correct. But if we focus on the secondary and tertiary industries, we can see that the employment still grows. Here I present you the figures. You can see that between the year 2010 and 2024, the urban population due to urbanization still increased from more than 6 million to more than 9 million. Most of the laborers in the urban sector will work in the secondary and tertiary industries. Please notice that our agriculture only accounts for 7%. 93% of our GDP is in secondary and tertiary industries. So if people are moving towards the cities, our labor supply in the 93% of GDP can still grow. So this is why we see that employment in the second and tertiary sectors still grew from more than 4 million to more than 7 million. It is still growing because of urbanization. And we still have a lot of room for people to come. Why? Because we still have a huge gap between the urban area and the rural area, and between the developed regions and the underdeveloped regions. Let me show you the number. In 2024, the per capita disposable income between urban and rural areas remained nearly more than 2 times, while the highest to lowest multiples for per capita regional GDP and per capita disposable income among different provinces were still more than 4 times and very close to 4 times, respectively. So this means we still have space for interregional migration. And if I show you the regional development using big data, this is the result we got using big data of truck flows. You can clearly see that China's regional development is forming a pattern of city clusters. including Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, and Yangtze River Delta, Pearl River Delta, and Chongqing and Chengdu area. And you can also see that in the modern development, the central cities are playing more and more important roles to be a leader of the regional development of city clusters. Okay, so where do people move? We Chinese people say, 人往高处走. People always move to the places where they can get better job and higher income. So when we look at the population census, here I want to show you the relocation of population in China, which is still ongoing. The red and orange, yellow areas means their population is growing. But the blue and green colors mean their population is declining. People may ask, how about the western part of China? Let me tell you, the western half of China only accounts for 6% of population in China. So let us focus on the eastern part of China. Okay, you can see what? You can see people are going to, first, coastal area. Second, if it is far from the coast, they are going to large cities, usually provincial capitals. Okay, and then we look at county level. Let me tell you that there is one thing which is very special in China. In China, county means your city, but our city means your county. In China, cities govern counties, okay? So county is the lowest level of cities, right? You can see that people are going to actually downtown areas, the city centers, right? Which means what? As I said, because service are becoming more and more important, people are going to where they can find jobs and where they can consume services. Service is what? Service needs face-to-face interaction, which relies on population size and population flow and population density. So I'm quite sure that if you want to go to China to invest, please go to the places where they're still gaining population rather than go to the places where they're losing population, unless you are investing in agriculture. Okay? People are still concentrating. Okay? So given this idea, I can judge that how can China sustain high growth in the future? As I said, it is very pessimistic if we forecast the Chinese economy based on the textbook style theory to look at fading democratic dividend, overinvestment and falling returns. And land urbanization is also faster than the population urbanization. In the past years, the urbanization process in some cities expanded the city size very much, maybe too much, right? And total factor productivity as a measurement of efficiency is also declining. But in our view of structural development, let me emphasize that labor can move. If labor move from the agriculture sector to the urban sector, then labor supply in the modern sector can still increase. Right? Secondly, where to investment? Where to invest? People argue that Chinese economy lack opportunities for investment. No. We have different places. In the large cities, in the places where people are going to, we still have a lot of opportunities for investment, including infrastructure. In the recent months, in China, there is a huge movement for people to have some, I can call it as sports. I can also call it as culture events, which is soccer games, right? When soccer games are being held in China, some provinces even find that they don't have enough stadiums, right? Because they didn't put emphasis on the investment on stadiums to satisfy people's need. But now, when they realize the importance of consumption growth and service and sports, they started to invest on stadiums. So there is opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities to invest on this kind of infrastructure. Number three, land supply. People are arguing that the housing market is now declining. It's true if you look at price. But as I said, people are still going to cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. In the regions where we are still seeing a growing population, we still have the capacity to build more housing to accommodate more people, including poor people, because the central government is now emphasizing the provision of public housing for the poor people. Okay, and finally, if we reallocate those resources from the population losing region to the population gaining regions, then the total factor productivity as a measurement of efficiency can also increase. So that's the way out of the problem of China. Then maybe you will worry that, as many people worry, how about agglomeration? How about inequality of different regions? In these 2 days, a lot of people are also talking about the integration of the market in ASEAN countries, which means that people will move more easily than before in the future, right, across different countries. The thing which happens in China now will also happen if you want to integrate your market. That is, the population and economic agglomeration will go on. So there is a worry whether different regions or different countries will be more unequal, right? So let us look at China. Here I draw a figure for 3 countries for a comparison. The left one is China. In the middle, there is the United States. And then we also draw a figure for Japan. For each country, we have 3 lines. The blue solid line is a measurement of inequality in terms of size. Let me emphasize, it's inequality of size of economic activities across different cities within that country. You can see that in United States, the size inequality is very high, very high. And then look at the dotted line in blue. That is the inequality of a size of a population in that country between different regions. You can see what? Population also concentrates. And population concentrates together with economic concentration. So let us look at the red line, dashed line. That is what? That is inequality of GDP per capita across different regions in that country. You can see GDP concentration, population concentration, then low inequality, right? Because GDP per capita is GDP over population, right? So agglomeration leads to equality rather than inequality, actually. Now let us look at Japan. Japan is the same. You see, high inequality of size of GDP, high inequality of size of population. Then the red line, equality across different regions. Now let us look at China. China is during transition. Our economic agglomeration is just at the level of Japan's. The question in China is, the dotted line shows that our concentration of population lags far behind economic concentration. So the result is what? Our GDP per capita across different regions, which is in red, is still very high. That is the bad news. But good news is what? The good news is, as I showed, people are moving. So if you look at the dotted line, you can see that the dotted line is moving up, slowly. Then, consequently, the red line is going down. Red line going down means what? Means that different regions in China are seeing a trend of convergence of GDP per capita. Let us forecast in the future, if we see that people are moving further, then GDP per capita will converge even further. So we don't need to worry that different regions will become unequal. Your worry might only be because of politics. In China, we also face this kind of politics because each region, each province wants to maximize their GDP size. In the future of your integration, maybe different countries will also want to maximize GDP size because GDP size determines one country's or one region's fiscal income. But the result is, if you look at GDP per capita, I mean, free flow of people, migration will converge different countries, different regions, GDP per capita. So, following this rule, in recent years, the Chinese government said that we need to adjust and improve the regional policy system according to the objective economic law. Give full play to the comparative advantages of different regions and promote the rational flow and efficient agglomeration of various production factors. For the regions where they welcome migrants, we need to enhance the economic and population carrying capacity of advantageous areas such as central cities and city clusters. By what? By building more, by investment. And there are also some regions where they are losing population. Chinese government said that we need to enhance the functions of the other regions in ensuring and food security, ecological security, and border security, so that we can have different regions to have different comparative advantage and specialization in a specific region to serve the whole goal and strategy of the country. And finally, it is also very important for us to ensure equity by ensuring the bottom line of people's livelihood, promote the equalization of basic public services, and create balance during development. Here, I want to emphasize again that this balance is not balance in terms of size, it's balance in terms of GDP and income per capita. So, let me summarize. We need to deepen regional cooperation mechanism by building a unified, open, and competitive, orderly market for commodities and production factors. This is why we emphasize market integration and development. And land, we also improve the land allocation efficiency and also encouraging the central government to give more fiscal transfer to help the lagged regions. Finally, let me also compare China and Japan. Because in today's world, a lot of people are worrying that nowadays China is facing the same issues that Japan faced in the late 1980s. Because if you look at high housing prices, high exports, high debt, and exchange rate also appreciating pressure in the recent years, maybe you will argue that these two countries are very similar. But let me emphasize that, again, that these two countries are totally different. Today, China's GDP per capita is now only 1/6 of that of the United States. But Japan used to have the same level as the United States when they faced the problems. Secondly, as I argue, Japan didn't have the structural problems of China, but now we have a lot of structural problems. Strategically, when I call them as problems, they are problems. But when we solve it, they are also our chances, right? So, let me conclude. The first important thing in the near future is still to launch a lot of macroeconomic policies, which should be more aggressive to save the economy. But secondly, we need to have more structural policies to boost consumption, especially the development of services. Number three, we need to integrate the market by fair competition review even further. Number four, we need to welcome agglomeration to promote urbanization and build metropolitan areas. And by doing so, we also need to citizenize the migrants to allow them to live in the cities where they work permanently. Number five, to reform at home and to open up to the outside world, which is also very useful for the new global order and also very good for our domestic economy. And finally, debt. How to deal with debt issue? For me, it is very easy. Of course, everything is not that easy. But for me, there is one easy way. That is to allow the places where they can earn money to earn money, especially those large cities. And then we use the money they earn to pay back the debts of the inland, of the smaller cities where they have no hope to repay. We are one country, right? So that's our solution. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Professor, for your very insightful session. There's a lot to unpack. So I see we're opening up the floor to Q&A. I see a lot of hands. Maybe number 4.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, Hisham Hamdan from Khazanah. Professor Ming Lu, that was brilliant. Can we go back to the last slide again? If you can, the team put on the last slide.
I cannot control it.
Yeah, the last slide. The last slide. Professor Ming Lu, the conclusion slide, if you're going to put sort of a color code in terms of where do you think Chinese government is, in terms of their thinking or execution, whether green, yellow, or red, can you comment one by one in terms of where they are in terms of hukou, for example, in terms of to boost the population of the cities, as you said, underpopulated. where they are in terms of, helping the, the rural or whatever it is. Maybe just give a sense of where the government leaders are in this thing.
I think there is a rule and regularity behind the regional development in China as a representative of a modern economy. It is clearly that in our statistical work, we can find that the closer you are to the big ports, and the closer you are to the big cities, the more possible for to see an increasing number of population, which means these places are for the government and only for the investors to go to increase the supply. And the farther away you are from the coast, the farther away you are from the large cities, the regional centers, the more possible for to see a declining population, which means that you need to decrease the supply, including infrastructure in the future. So that's a simple answer. The progress, you're talking about the progress. The macroeconomic policy now is already very, very relaxing. But still, we will need to wait for another round of macroeconomic policy to be very expansionary after the recent central level conference in November. That's my expectation. The structural policy to encourage the service development is very clear now. In September, we issued a document to encourage the service development. Agglomeration is ongoing, and opening up after the third plenary conference of the Central Party, it was argued that we need to open up telecom, internet, medical care, education, culture sectors even further. Now, the medical care and education are the leaders of the opening up in the service sector. I guess some internet services ongoing, but still not that clear. And culture sector is also being opened. And finally, that the Chinese actually already doing so. The central leaders emphasize that we need to empower the leading provinces in GDP growth, the coastal area, to grow, to give them more resources, which means what? Which means they rely on the coastal area to earn money, right? So that's what we are doing so. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Professor. If you can move slightly to the back of the room, maybe number 5.
Hi, Professor. I'm Benjamin. I'm also of Khazanah. I wanted to double tap into the manufacturing deflation number for a bit. How much of that is or can be explained by the adoption of automation? And how much of that is perhaps explained by the decline of the real estate market and adjacent sectors like housing appliances?
Many reasons. The first reason is we face the, as you said, the capital and machines and robots are substituting labors in the manufacturing sector. But even more importantly, we face some pressure from the outside world because you know that Chinese economy used to export a lot of manufacturing goods to the outside, but now the demand is very limited. Okay, and also because of the United States, limited our export to the U.S. market, and domestically, it is very important to understand that the local governments in China encourage the development of manufacturing a lot in the past. But now, ever since last year, the central leaders emphasize more and more on reducing the capacity of those overcapacity industries, including solar panel and EV cars, a lot of things. So this is also why the trend of growth of manufacturing is not that good in recent years. And this is also why you see CPI in those manufacturing sectors is actually still declining. So many factors together. It is very hard to decompose into each factor to see a number, but I can judge that all these things contribute to the declining trend of manufacturing growth. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Maybe let's move to the side of the room. Number 6, please.
Hi, thank you, Professor. Thanks for your presentation. I'm Kai Hong from Khazanah Research Division. So my question is on the demand stimulation side. A recent hot topic is the mandatory payment of social security. So I just wonder your thought on that, because on one hand, the government is trying to boost demand consumption, but on the other hand, making this payment contribution compulsory could reduce disposable income and also add to the cost of doing business. So doesn't that seem somewhat contradictory? And given current China macro backdrop, do you think it's a good time to implement that? Thank you.
In short run, I would also argue that this could be conflicting between each other, the two policy goals. But as time goes by, I think China needs to change our growth pattern from relying on low cost too much to a growth pattern based on more relying on innovation and social security, which means that for the whole country, not only look at manufacturing, but also look at services. Service development needs a lot of things. Number one is money, right? Secondly, is time. In China, if we only focus on manufacturing, the labor income grows very slowly compared with capital income. So only by developing services can increase labor income and job opportunities. Secondly, Chinese people are too hardworking. Too hardworking. We work every day. We work maybe more than 10 hours every day. So which means that in short run, this increases competitiveness in the global market. But as time goes by, this kind of pattern means that people don't have time to consume. So in the future, we need to cut working hours. And the central government is also optimizing the holidays in China. The recent policy is to extend the holiday days for the school children, which means that they have more time to go to other places for consumption, for tourism, etc. So as time goes by, I think restructuring of the economy is very important.
All right, thank you. Maybe we'll just take one online question, just to be fair to the audience. Let me read out one then. One of the issues we keep hearing these days is the second China shock arising from industrial overcapacity in China. So what are your thoughts on this subject, and how do you think China should address the issue on overcapacity?
We have a lot of things to do, and some are being done actually. The one I mentioned in my talk is the fair competition review, which means that the Chinese local governments are required by the central government to give up all the subsidies they used to have to give the enterprises to produce, especially for the manufacturing sector, including subsidy on the land price and capital and export. Some subsidies on export is actually from the payment of the local governments, which is not good. Now they cannot do that anymore. So that's one thing which is very important. In the long run, Chinese government will also reform our fiscal system. China's tax system is relying on production very much, which is called as 增值税, VAT. And 增值税, VAT is based on production. So now the ongoing reform is to try to expand our fiscal system, I mean the tax system, to be more relying on consumption tax, which means that by changing this system, Chinese local governments will not emphasize that much on production, especially the manufacturing sector, but more on people, on migration, on consumption and services. So that's also very important. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Professor. I think we have maybe time for a couple of one or two more questions. Maybe let's take number 3, and then we'll circle back to number 2.
Hi, thank you, Professor Lu. Your strong argument is that services is it's the bright spot in the Chinese economy. However, I think some reports talk about how the lack of social safety net in China is leading to a sense of insecurity and therefore a lack of willingness to spend. And in the reforms that you've talked about just now, I do not see that. Do you think that the Chinese government is willing to introduce more social safety net as a way to boost consumption? Thank you.
I think if you ask Chinese government whether they are willing to do so, they are willing to do so. But the current challenge is, first, China does not have a national-wide social security system so far, which means that in the coming years, maybe we need to build as fast as we can to build a nationwide integrated social security system. Why this is very important? Because a lot of workers in China's cities are migrants. being migrants, if they leave the places where they work now, for example, Shanghai, only after they contribute to the pension system more than 15 years, they can get access equally to the social security system. Otherwise, now, according to the current system, they need to leave and close the pension account and to open another one in the next stop. So this should be a priority of the reform by building a nationwide social security system. And the second challenge is for the flexible workers. Due to the platform development, a lot of workers are not working in a factory, but they work individually. So the pension system needs to be redesigned to accommodate the need of those flexible workers, but that is also very challenging, not only in China, but also for other countries, right? The flexible workers is a trend everywhere. Okay.
Right, thank you. I think we are out of time, but thank you, Professor, for a very insightful session.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we can put our hands together and give a warm applause.